Breaking news tonight, Mica Miller's pastor husband's home raided by the FBI after Mica's mysterious suicide. Good evening, I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us.
God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that?
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
I just want my family to know where to find me.
I got this lay next to her body and spent time with her body about 4 times this week, and each time it still didn't hit me. I thought she was going to wake up, I even tried to raise her from the dead one time this week.
Okay, to my knowledge, that's only happened twice in history. There was Lazarus, who was raised from the dead, if you choose to believe the Bible, and I do. And then, of course, there was Christ. Now, did I just understand John Paul Miller, the husband of a beautiful, beautiful, on the inside and the out, young woman, Mica, now dead, did he just say I laid next to her body and spent time with her body 4 times this week and it didn't hit me? I thought she was going to wake up. I even tried to raise her from the dead. Okay, Lauren Conlon joining me, investigative reporter, co-host Primetime Crime on YouTube. You can find her at popcrime.tv. Lauren, did I hear that right? I need a reality check. Did he just say he tried to raise her from the dead and he laid by her body 4 times and he still didn't realize that she was dead?
Yes, Nancy, you're correct. He said that. John Paul Miller has said a plethora of odd statements. And I also want to point out that when he announced his wife's death, it was almost like a side note at the end of this sermon, which just did not sit right with me.
In the last days, the FBI has raided Mica Miller's husband's home. Why? With me, an all-star panel to make sense of what we know right now. But before I get into the raid, I want to speak to Anna Francis. This is Mica's sister. Anna, thank you for being with us. Were you surprised at all when you learned the FBI, I'm not talking about Andy and Barney from Mayberry, I'm talking about the FBI, raiding his home? Were you surprised at all?
I don't think we're necessarily surprised with anything that happens anymore. It seems like no matter what is going on in this case, there's things that are happening in right and left field the whole time. So our family's basically just staying hopeful that justice will come for Mica, but nothing can surprise us at this point.
While many speculate as to the reason the FBI raided, swarmed Mica Miller's husband's home, many believe that somehow, some way, it relates back to this.
Investigators at Lumber River State Park are notified by a kayaker at 4:23 p.m. that a body is in the river and a black bag with ID and money found on the bank of the river is turned over to law enforcement as well. Officers recovered 2 spent casings and 1 live round on the bank of the river, and there's no sign of a physical struggle. A regional pathologist is called to the scene for assistance. Mica Miller is found submerged in the river beside tree limbs about 100 feet from the casings.
To Anna Francis joining us. This is Mica's sister. When did you learn that Mica had passed away?
That night, very late, and I got a call from my brother. Actually, it was about midnight almost, and my brother goes to bed very early, so I knew something was wrong. So he told me what had happened, and I just couldn't believe it. I said, there's no way. She's probably just hiding somewhere. She probably faked it just to get away. But just disbelief is what happened first through my mind for probably weeks.
With me, Regina Ward. This is Mica's sister's lawyer, attorney for her family. You can find her at attorneyreginaward.com. Regina, thank you for being with us. Why is it do you believe that so many supporters of Mica still believe that somehow the husband's responsible?
Well, obviously, there are too many questions that are unanswered. There are things that don't add up to a logical thought pattern. And so those types of things obviously keep it questionable. And the other thing, I guess at the end of the day, as far as eyewitnesses to what happened, to say really what happened on that day. And without that information, looking at everything else, Mr. Miller's bizarre behavior after the passing of his wife, so many things, and plus the history of that relationship certainly makes anyone look at that and say things just don't. It just doesn't pass the smell test. It just doesn't add up.
Well, for so long, she had lived basically under a reign of fear. She was undermined at every turn by alleged affairs, her tires being flatted, her car being taken, one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. Long story short, we do know this. Listen.
Mica contacted police after her estranged husband posted an indecent photo of her on a Facebook group called Big and Nice Curves. Police told Mica since the photo was posted anonymously, there was nothing they could do. John Paul Miller apologized to Mica via email, telling her, "I'm sorry for putting a picture of you on the internet." He added, "I just wanted to try and hurt you." He also included, "It was evil of me to do that."
Of course, it has been ruled a suicide, yet that is not stopping protesters. Straight out to Eric J. Davis, private investigator licensed in this jurisdiction. You can find him at RDFIG, that is Richardson, Davis, and Forrest Investigative Group, and, for my purposes, he's former FBI supervisory agent. Eric Davis, thank you for being with us. I find that very difficult to believe that the pastor puts in writing, "I'm sorry for putting the picture of you on the internet. I just wanted to try and hurt you. It was evil of me to do that." Yet, that has not been prosecuted. So, how hard is it to prove? I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of IP, Internet Provider Address. Any such transmission can be traced directly back to the computer from whence it came. It's like a fingerprint. Then we've got in writing, the man apologizes he did it. Posting her indecent photo on a site called Big and Nice Curves? Really? And that wasn't prosecuted, Eric Davis? Why?
Well, it may be prosecuted. The FBI conducted a raid and brought the evidence response team into JP's house. And that could have been for a myriad of reasons, but certainly that would have been one of them, to check the computers for any evidence that he had sent it, or his phones. And other things they could be looking at could be a white collar offense having to do with the church and money movement. It's hard to know until you get a hold of the affidavit. And when you have a search warrant, that means a special agent went to a judge and convinced the judge there was probable cause of a federal crime, and the judge agreed and permitted the search warrant. But the affidavit, I'm sure, is sealed right now, so we can't read it yet.
Oh, yeah, you know what? Eric Davis joining us from Richardson, Davis, and Forrest Investigative Group. I like what you just said, because you know how the feds love a money trail. But that said, Karen Stark, I need help. I need a shrink. Karen Stark, renowned psychologist, joining us out of Manhattan, TV, radio trauma expert. You can find her at KarenStark.com, Karen with a C. Karen, thanks again for being with us. Posting your wife's photo. Anna Francis, was it a naked photo? Was she clothed in any way?
From what I could tell, it was a naked photo, Nancy, but it was blurred. And every step of the way, the police did not investigate when she complained about anything that had to do with coercive control, ways that he was subtly, very subtly taking over her life. And he was tracking her, and they said they couldn't investigate that. They didn't investigate the photo. She was married. They kept coming up with reasons for why they could not help this beautiful woman whose life was taken over by this pastor.
Karen Stark, I agree with everything you just said, but my question was not that. Your response was unresponsive. I asked you about a man that would post, well, any woman, much less his wife's, naked photo on big and nice curves. I mean, what a POC, technical legal term. You got to help me out. I don't understand the thinking, Karen Stark.
This is what he's all about. And he knows that if he does that, he's going to humiliate her. It's one more way that she doesn't feel good about herself.
Guys, we are learning that in the last days, the FBI has raided the home of Mica Miller's pastor husband, John Paul Miller. This as protests go on outside the church, outside his home. Why did the FBI swarm his home, taking out bag after bag after bag? What's happening? Listen.
Pastor John Paul Miller isn't home when the FBI evidence response team shows up to raid his South Carolina home. The FBI won't say what they're looking for, and FBI spokesman Kevin Wheeler tells USA Today the FBI is conducting court-authorized law enforcement activity, and due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, will be providing no further comments on the matter. The lawyer for Pastor John Paul Miller, Russell Long, claims the FBI is on a fishing expedition. There was no affidavit attached to the search warrant. Therefore, I have no idea what it's in relation to. All day long, members of the FBI's evidence response team go in and out of the home carrying paper bags and other items from the home.
I just want to let you know that I'm alive and well, and I'm going through a lot, and it's hard. The circumstances would change. I pray that the fear inside would flee in Jesus' name.
It's very hard to believe that Mica Miller is dead, her body found submerged in a body of water. Joining me in an all-star panel, but I want to go first to Christiana joining us, who claims that the pastor, John Paul Miller, begged her for nude photos. Christiana, thank you for being with us. What happened?
He came into the restaurant where I was working back in February and left his phone number on his receipt. And I'm a very curious person, and you can't be too cautious these days. So out of curiosity, I looked him up to see who he was. I saw that he was a pastor and quite possibly married. And I guess I didn't react like most people would. And I was suspicious, and it made me angry, because I've grown up watching similar situations to this take place. So I thought, is there something I can do? Can I perhaps report this to his church or contact his wife or something? I wasn't sure. I ended up talking to a friend of mine who had a friend who had attended the church and had a very bad experience. So I ended up getting some information from that friend. And when I spoke with him, I didn't let on that I was aware of anything about him. And I ended up with screenshots of him asking for nudes and just being generally sleazy.
Okay, I want to hear the whole thing, Christiana. What do you mean by generally being sleazy?
He said that he wanted to see, he asked if I had a picture of me with just a mermaid tail. I do character appearances for birthday parties and things as a mermaid. And he was saying that in response to one of my photos, asking if I had one, basically asking if I had a topless picture.
I have a question. Okay.
Yes.
Well, wait. So you're a waitress in a restaurant. He comes in.
Yes.
He gives you his phone number, right? And
yes.
You start communicating by text and phone, I guess. And he wants you to give him a photo of you with nothing but a mermaid tail on.
That's correct.
Okay, hold on. Let me just digest that for just one moment. Okay. You mentioned this was in February of what year?
This year.
2024. And
That's correct.
that would have been just before Mica was found dead in April of 24. Okay, I'm going to circle back to that timeline. So you said he was asking for nude photos, plus a mermaid tail. And what did you say? You said he was also generally sleazy. In what way? And all this time, you knew he's not only married, but a pastor to boot. So what happened?
We didn't text a whole lot. It was for about 2 weeks, just occasional. I guess I just kept the line of communication open enough to get the screenshots, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it from there because I had learned from my friend that his church had a history of covering up his behavior, and I was unable to find any way to contact his wife at the time. There was a Facebook page in her name, but I gathered that he was running it, and I didn't know if she had any access to it, and I couldn't find anything else, so I just kind of...
Did you ever tell him you knew he was a married pastor?
I did not.
What did you do with the screenshots? Did you ever show them to anyone?
So, well, initially, now after I found out about Mica, I had talked with another friend and said, should I text him and see how he responds? And my friend was like, yeah, if you're up for it, go for it. Because his friend was covering some of it. And so I sent him a text and I just played it off and said something like, hey, stranger, how have you been? Anything new? And this man responded with, yes, lots new, LOL, days after what happened to her. And so I have a screenshot of that and all of the previous screenshots, but I haven't done anything else with them except I sent the entire conversation to Regina so that she would have the full account.
You know, that's really interesting that he is coming to you, a waitress he spots like a shark at work, gets your number and immediately starts asking you for naked photos. This, in comparison to what he just told WPDE. Listen.
Never once in any way, shape, or form. Not in any type of abuse, not physical, no type of abuse ever. I took better care of her than any man could have possibly taken care of her.
That's from our friends at WPDE ABC 15. Hold on, let's analyze that. Anna Francis is with me. This is Mica's sister. He says, not once in any way, shape, or form, not in any type of abuse, not physical, and then he backtracks, no type of abuse ever. I took better care of her than any man could have possibly taken care of her in any way. Does that include hitting on Christina in a restaurant and asking for nude photos? Then just days after your sister's death by gunshot wound, her body found submerged in a body of water, he writes, lots happening, LOL.
There's a lot that he will try to cover up for the rest of his life and try to deny and tell himself that that's not the truth when everyone else around him knows that that's not the truth. He will still continue to push his narrative for the rest of his life.
Anna, I appreciate your thought that he will live in a mental and emotional hell of his own making. But let me ask you a question, okay? When a snake, let's just say rattlesnake, bites and kills someone, you think it feels bad about that? Or does it just slither off and look for the next victim?
I don't think snakes have feelings, and I don't think he does either.
I wouldn't count on him to live the rest of his life in emotional turmoil about the way he treated your sister before she died. Yet this is what he says to WPDEABC. Let's listen to that one more time.
Never once in any way, shape, or form. Not in any type of abuse, not physical, no type of abuse ever. I took better care of her than any man could have possibly taken care of her.
Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app where you can get all of our content where we, in our own way, seek justice.
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
You don't know where you're at?
A national park. I just want my family to know where to find me.
While Mica Miller's family and friends hold service beachside for Mica, John Paul Miller delivers a eulogy for his estranged wife, Mica Miller, at Solid Rock at Market Common. Miller seems to cry without any tears while talking about how he tried to raise Mica from the dead. Claims he laid down with his wife about 4 times, and when he took a dog tag necklace Mica had given him to the mall to get it fixed, he saw a woman wearing Mica's dress with the same tattoo and hairstyle. He calls out, "Mica!" But it was her sister. Thought he had raised Mica from the dead.
Okay, whoa, wait. He thought he raised Mica from the dead, according to him. After that, can we believe anything he has to say? But let's go to the here and now. But when you look at the here and now, let's just say, when you don't know a horse, look at his track record. What a history of, let me say euphemistically, turbulence this couple has had. Listen.
After Mica's tires have been slashed and a GPS tracker is removed from her car, she gets an apology email from John Paul Miller. In the apology email, Pastor John Paul Miller tells his estranged wife, quote, "When someone hurts me, I try to hurt them back rather than forgive." He goes on to say, quote, "Instead of forgiving you, I just attack and try to cause pain."
Okay, I'm not quite sure why he is attacking her. What has she ever done to him? Now, there you hear, he apologizes for slashing her tires. He admits he had a GPS tracker on her car. But just like posting the semi-nude photo of his wife to something called Big and Nice Curves, I've never even heard of that before, nothing was done. And now Mica is dead. But that's not all. Listen to what Mica told police herself.
Mica Miller calls police February 10th to a Walmart parking lot to report her car stolen by her estranged husband. She explains to police she has been hospitalized against her will, and while she was in the hospital, John Paul Miller got her purse and keys. She tells police she has known her husband since she was 10, and he groomed her while she worked for him at their church. Police tell Mica since they are still married, the car is marital property and they can't charge him with anything.
I don't understand. Lauren Collin, investigative reporter, you have him apologizing in writing for surreptitiously posting her semi-nude on some freak site and getting some kind of a weird kick out of it. You have him apologizing for slashing her tires, for putting a GPS tracker on her, yet local law enforcement did nothing. You got a woman crying in the Walmart parking lot and nothing happens? What is wrong?
Nothing happens, Nancy. It's completely heartbreaking. And as it was just stated, she was hospitalized against her will. So this is just another form of J.P. Miller's alleged coercive control.
To Dr. Kendall Crowns joining us, a renowned chief medical examiner in Tarrant County, that's Fort Worth, never a lack of business at the morgue there. Lecturer at the esteemed Burnett School of Medicine, TCU. Dr. Kendall Crowns, thank you for being with us. I just want to make sure. Many people do not believe that Mica Miller committed suicide. I know she bought the gun. I've seen the video of her buying the gun. I know what she said to the 911 dispatch, but yet I still want definitive proof, okay? Call me a doubter, but I just want to know. Now, how can we prove that her gunshot wound was absolutely self-inflicted? Help me, Dr. Crowns.
Certainly. So based on the autopsy report, she has a gunshot wound on the right side of her head that has stellate tears, a muzzle impression, and black
that has
particulate
what? Tears?
material.
What?
Yeah, stellate tears, which are when the gases of the bullet go into the scalp, it pulls up and it creates this kind of stellate wound pattern on the skin. She also has black particulate matter in the wound, which is from gunpowder. So the one thing is, so this
But
is a
Dr.
sick.
Kendall Crowns, if someone held a gun to your head and shot you point blank, a so-called contact wound where the gun is making contact with your head, you'd get all of that. That doesn't tell me it's suicide. That tells me she died of a contact gunshot wound.
That's correct. A contact gunshot wound will cause all that. And if someone executes you, they would have to hold you in place or somehow subdue you and then shoot you in the head. So all we have is a contact wound. But you have the context of she makes the 911 call, she purchases the gun, and then she is found with the gun, or found in the water, but guns at the scene with 2 fired casings. It all has kind of the fitting of a suicide. Granted, someone could have shot her in the head, but it would be difficult to shoot someone in the head without subduing them in some way, tying them up, cuffing them, or filling them.
Unless you convinced them it was the right thing to do. Dr. Kendall Crowns, I know you spend most of your time in the morgue, which is a whole nother can of worms for me. But that said, yes, people have been convinced to commit suicide. I'm sure you recall Heaven's Gate. That was a new religious movement at the time where many people, a couple of dozen people, were convinced to commit suicide to go to the hereafter. And then, of course, there was the pastor Jim Johnson that convinced people to drink poisonous Kool-Aid. Off the top of my head, I can think of Michelle Carter, who convinced her very, very tender, young, innocent boyfriend to inhale carbon monoxide till he dies. Yes, people have been convinced to commit suicide. It has happened.
I agree with you. Individuals have been convinced to commit suicide by other individuals. But what you were referring to earlier was someone shooting her in the head at contact range. Was she convinced by someone to kill herself? A possibility. Do I think someone was standing there and pulled the trigger? It's questionable. So,
right there. You know how I like hard evidence. I don't want to talk about how she may have been convinced to commit suicide. I want to talk about the possibility that she was shot by someone else, okay? That she was convinced to purchase the gun, convinced to call 911, and then someone else pulled the trigger. Is it far-fetched? I don't know. Is it? Because many, many people, right or wrong, believe she didn't pull the trigger. So is there any hard evidence? I know her body was in water, submerged in water, Dr. Kendall Crowns. So if there had been gunshot residue on her hand, we know that when you pull a trigger, nearly invisible particulate emits from the gun, as fine as baby powder, and gets on your hand, and it can go as far as 3 feet. Well, proven to go as far as 3 feet. All of that would have been destroyed in the water, or would it?
I believe the gunshot residue would have been destroyed in the water itself, yes. So by placing her in water, you could potentially cover up some of the evidence.
Dr. Kendall Crowns, I know you are the medical examiner. You are the esteemed lecturer. I know that. But isn't it true when medical examiners are trying to determine manner of death? We know she died of gunshot wound. Manner of death, was it an accident? Was it a homicide? Was it suicide? You look at extrinsic evidence, evidence that is not related to the body itself, such as the 911 call, such as the video of her purchasing the gun. Isn't that true?
That's correct. You use all that information to help you determine the manner of death.
So in this case, are you relying on extrinsic evidence or evidence obtained from her body when you say you believe it was a suicide?
So you would use both. You would use the evidence obtained from the extrinsic evidence that she purchased the gun, she made the 911 phone call, Then you would look at the evidence on the body, the contact range gunshot wound, the fact that there's no evidence of restraint, and no evidence that she was drugged or anything of that nature. So you would use all those findings to make the determination of suicide.
In addition to Dr. Kendall Crown's renowned medical examiner, as you know, Anna Francis is joining us along with her lawyer, Regina Ward. Anna, the sister of Mica Miller, was a full autopsy done on your sister? And if not, why?
It turns out there was not a full autopsy done.
Regina Ward, did I hear that correctly? There was not a full autopsy?
That's correct, but you have to remember legally who had the authority to ask for one of those, and that would have been her husband, Mr. Miller.
John Paul Miller's ex-wife, Allison Miller, filed for divorce from John Paul Miller after finding out he was having an affair with their babysitter and his best friend's wife, Mica. Mica Miller was married to John Paul Miller's best friend, Jeremy Deese, whom Mica married when she was just 18.
What does John Paul Miller say? How can we analyze his behavior? Take a listen to him. This is from Celebration of Life.
I want to read one of the more recent poems she wrote. And that's nothing. She was so creative. It was just always just coming out of her. Imagine being married to that. It was like that in our house all the time.
Is he actually crying or was he laughing? That clip is from the official Solid Rock Ministries Facebook page. I would take that down immediately. But that said, Anna Francis is with me, Mica's sister. That has just got to make your skin crawl whenever you watch that.
Absolutely. And he was laughing, by the way. That was not a cry. That was a laugh. You were correct.
You know, Karen Stark joining me, renowned psychologist, TV, radio trauma expert. Karen, how many times have you seen people try to cry and they're but nothing, there's no tears, there's not any even snot, nothing?
Nancy, look at everything that he's saying. I have to agree with you. I mean, this man is not crying. We all know that. There's no tears coming out, and he's doing so much self-comforting, touching his face, touching his eyes. He can't stop touching himself because he's so anxious. There is nothing about this person that's grieving over the loss of his wife. And when we know the backstory, and it's a horrific backstory, how could he be talking about his loss, her creativity, all the wonderful things she did, and how he is the only one? How narcissistic is that? He is the only one that really cared about her.
I want to go back to Regina Ward, Mica's sister's lawyer. She's at attorneyreginaward.com. You were there. You observed some of the federal raid, the FBI swarming your house. And I got to tell you something. That's one thing I do not want to see, the FBI picking through my trash in the backyard. No. That does not bode well. Now, we know because Eric Davis reminded us, Eric Davis joining us, PI, and jump in, Eric, if you have a thought on this, and I'm sure you do. We know that typically when a search occurs, that the affidavit of PC probable cause is attached. What makes them want to enter the premises? What are they looking for? That's what's on the PC affidavit. It was, in this case, not attached. So what did you observe, Regina, during the raid?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I was there. Once I learned that the FBI had arrived on the scene to execute that search warrant, I wanted to go, obviously, myself there because I have an interest, obviously, in this case, all the way to the end, getting the law changed so that we can take, get people like Mr. Miller in handcuffs for the things that he's done. But as far as the FBI conducting their search, obviously they're bagging things, putting them in paper bags. They put them in boxes. They've covered most of the things that they brought out of the house, obviously for various reasons. You know, we do have this thing called the chain of custody with regard to evidence. And obviously anything that they remove from there, they're going to want to make sure that it was bagged, as they say, tagged appropriately, labeled appropriately, because, you know, criminal defense attorneys can challenge those things. Obviously, we want, if and when the indictment does come to arrest John Paul Miller, we want that to stick. We want him to be convicted, and so it's very important that all of that evidence be carefully handled. And
Well, what did you observe? What did you observe? That's on the FBI how they're going to handle the evidence. And I guarantee you, if they're coming out with those brown paper bags, they've got everyone sealed to secure the chain of custody. But what did you see? I know he was out of town when it went down. I'm sure they knew that before they went in. But how big were the bags? How many bags? What did you hear? What did you observe?
Yes, during the time I was there were multiple size bags and boxes. What I would refer to as grocery bag, brown paper grocery bag type things that came out. The one thing that I was excited to see that was not bagged or covered was an all-in-one CPU. And so immediately my mind went to, yes, there's going to be some digital evidence there. We would hope anyway, that could lead to the next step. And the most important next step here, of course, is getting that indictment. The search warrant itself, whenever they execute that, they're looking for additional information.
But an indictment for what? You can't indict someone for cheating on their wife. Why are they searching his home? Does it have anything to do with this? Listen.
Days before his home is raided by FBI agents, Pastor John Paul Miller files court documents with the South Carolina Secretary of State for a new religious incorporation that he's calling Living Water Church at Market Common. The filing states the nonprofit corporation is for religious, educational, charitable, and literary purposes. The business address is listed as J.P. Miller's personal residence in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Miller also formally changed the address of his church, Solid Rock Ministries, to its current location. The business address for the church since 2006 has been the same address for the home he shared with his first wife, Allison.
The FBI raids the home of Pastor John Paul Miller months after his wife Mica's death was ruled a suicide. Why? Why now? What are they seeking to prove? Joining me, an all-star panel, to Eric Davis, private investigator. What, based on what we know, is the purpose of this raid? What are they looking for, Eric?
Well, as you know, sometimes the feds come in when local law enforcement fails to take action or is unable to take action. So if I'm the case agent, given this history of John Paul, I'm looking for fingerprints being taken. They're not taking fingerprints to find Mica's fingerprints. They know she lived there. They're looking for fingerprints of someone else. There's a myriad of reasons they could be looking, but it could be white collar stuff, the computers would have a lot of evidence of his financial transactions. So it could be a number of things based on his history.
You know what, Eric Davis, you're so right. The fact that you and Regina observed it and you're analyzing it, that digital evidence is clearly something they're looking at, seizing devices such as computers, laptops, and so forth. Could it have anything to do with John Paul Miller filing with the Secretary of State for a new religious incorporation he is calling Living Water Church at Market Common? Is it about that? Is it about, as you said, allegations of underage sex? Why would the FBI be doing that? Well, think. Use that noodle. Remember Jared Fogle, the subway pitchman? He was taking minors across state lines, enter the feds, for sex with minors. Translation, statutory rape. So if the feds want in, they will find a way in. And I've just got to ask you, Anna Francis is with me, Mica's sister. Everyone is talking about his affairs, his sex misconduct, dating back for really decades, allegedly. But that is not the grounds, cannot be the grounds for a criminal proceeding. What does it feel like to have your sister gone and to feel he is somehow responsible, even though legally he may not be, and nobody does anything? No one ever followed up with him slashing her tires and apologizing, posting her half nude without her knowledge on some freaky website, putting a GPS monitor on her phone. All of those are actual crimes, and nothing was ever done.
Yeah, that's a very heavy and loaded question for sure. Our family just stays hopeful through this process, that justice will come for her. Um, Nothing could ever be enough for what she actually endured, but we hope that accountability will happen. It's definitely necessary for her, for many other people that endured what he had put them through. We're really trying to focus on who Mica was as a person to get through this as a family. We're focusing on what she was going to do with her life. The last few months that she was still with us, she was organizing her new charity, Waymakers. She called it Waymakers because God always makes a way. You know, through her trials and through everything that terrible that was happening to her, she always said God will make a way. And we are trying to be her hands and her feet by carrying through her charity, doing events. We actually have one coming up November 16th in Market Commons. We're going to have Mica's first Mica's charity event. We're calling it Mica's Benefit Concert, actually, because she was a singer, and this is something that she was going to do. And we are going to carry out everything that she was planning on doing. And this is how we can have justice for Mica, is still be her voice and her hands and her feet.
Remember, John Paul Miller is innocent in the eyes of Lady Justice until he is proven beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal wrongdoing. Right now, he stands just as innocent as me or you. If you know or think you know anything about alleged misdoing, please contact Justice for Mica Tips. Mica, M-I-C-A. Justice for Mica Tips at gmail.com. Justice for Mica Tips at gmail.com. I guarantee you, Attorney Regina Ward will get any pertinent information to the FBI. Let's stop and remember an American hero, Corporal Christopher Jackson Dye, Walker County Sheriff, Georgia. Corporal Dye passes away in the line of duty. Dye survived by grieving wife Kelly and children Ashton, Sienna, Alexander, Bryce, and Chase. American hero, Corporal Christopher Jackson Dye. End of watch. Thank you to our guests, especially Anna Francis, Mica's sister, but also to you for being with us tonight and every night. Nancy Grace signing off. I'll see you tomorrow night, 6 and 9 o'clock sharp Eastern, and until then, good night, friend. Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app where you can get all of our content where we, in our own way, seek justice.